All right, 1, 2,
I think
3.
yours is Anchorman.
1, 2, 3. Not another teen movie.
I really want to break down these 3 specials from a crafting standpoint, from like just how you are able to achieve it, what you do as actors in those moments. But one of the things I was telling Ben specifically was, as I watched the show, I found myself going in between emotionally being invested in the characters you were playing and then reminding myself it was improv, which then hit this beautiful combination of, oh, this is going to be uncertain. They don't even know where this is going, but I actually care for the people that they're playing. Is that something that you build in? Like, do you want the audience to emotionally invest in the people you're playing versus just laughing? Because I found it to be a very, almost like an arc, like a film, like a cinema, like a story.
Yeah, that's very much something that we want. We love that that's like part of the thing when we're telling one story, we're telling a linear story. Well, not oftentimes linear, but we're telling a full story, a piece, that we want you to get invested in the characters enough that you care what happens to them. And then when Thomas or I do something funny with the idea of what you're expecting, it kind of brings you up. That's absolutely something we're playing with.
Yeah, I think if it was just Silly Pants McGee for an hour, you'd feel like you just ate a bag of chocolate. As chocolate comes loose in a bag, any chocolate I buy. And we want it to feel a little bit more satisfying. It'd be pretty tough to follow along with the narrative if we didn't take the time to, even if it's an absurd character, give you some kind of emotional stakes to it all. And the fact that you, as you have experienced, you go in and out of like being kind of invested in them, being aware of how insane it is. That's kind of how Ben and I play. We will take the moment to like play the emotional integrity of the scene, and then we'll call each other out and be insane and all that kind of stuff.
And that's what I find interesting is that element is you both are carrying each other through the bit. I mean, you both rely on each other extremely heavily. Are you, at this point, as you do these shows more often, are you able to know when the person needs help, in the sense of like when maybe someone's about to run out of like a joke or a bit and you kind of step in to kind of keep the thing afloat? Are those things you think about during? Like, do you see like Tom, all right, maybe he might.
Interesting question.
Yeah.
I know at the very beginning is which is the most rudimentary of it all. When we talk to an audience member, oftentimes I'll get a drink and then Thomas and I will look at each other. I'll know when Thomas has something and I won't even think. I'll just be ready to receive. And then I'll know when Thomas is still thinking and like, oh, if I have something, I can jump in now. But in scenes, what do you think, Thomas?
I would say what is very fortunate about performing with Ben and what we've managed to sort of tap into is that it's more of a case of tempering your contributions so that the other person has space to give theirs. Like it has happened where we're both kind of like, man, I don't know what to do next. And we'll say that. Part of what our show is, we can break the fourth wall. We can kind of do whatever we want. We'll address it. But most often it's like, oh, I have an idea. So do I. Okay, cool. Let's build it. That's what's nice about playing or doing improv with someone who's at the top of their game.
Wow. But there are moments when we both have ideas and you just have to, if Thomas gets his idea out before I do, I can't just be like, no. It's you. You're like, okay, let's do it. That's the idea of trust and going after it, whatever it is.
But even then, I would say Ben, like we've had times where kind of our ideas compete. And what I truly love about performing with Ben is that, yes, we have our mantra and what we want to do in order to accomplish the show, but we're allowed so much freedom that if I come in with an initiation to a scene or a character and Ben's like, that's really not what I had in mind, and then he'll kind of be like this, and then we might like tete-a-tete fight over it for a little bit, but that's all part of the joy, because I think also audience members like to see a little bit of like effing with each other.
Yeah,
whoa, Thomas. Whoa, Kevin. Dude, he said effing. Did you hear him?
You are more than welcome to curse on this.
He has never. Review. Thomas has literally never cursed. That would be his first one. That's the closest I've ever seen him curse.
This is breaking news.
I never fucking curse.
That was almost as good as Watch Your Fucking Mouth. That was actually really, really good. You know, one of the things I find fascinating though is each episode, I believe, is 52 minutes. One of them looks like it's 51. And I was just interested. I remember in the promos you were talking about the 52-minute bit, but I'm actually curious, is that actually a structural thing that you have to like think about when you're doing the show? Because as the show goes on, it is almost like a 3-act structure. You bring it to a close. How do you know where you are time-wise? I'm assuming you have a clock or something, but how do you know when to shift the different parts of the story? Because like in the first one, for example, we obviously have to get to the wedding. We have to get to the moment where they're, you know, where they're about to do the wedding. So you clearly, that's your end game. How do you shift in between the sections to get to the point where you end it right on time, but also give everything enough room to breathe?
Well, you are correct. We do have a clock.
Yeah.
Also, I think when you've been doing improv for an hour to an hour and a half or a half hour, like when you get past the realm of doing like a 20-minute or 15-minute Herald or something and start doing your own shows, you get booked, as it were, in 30 to an hour long, 30-minute to an hour long slots, and your brain kind of like realizes, okay, that's the time. And also during the show, we'll feel it. Like if it's had this low type of energy for a little bit, we may want something else to bring in it so it has a nice weird graph when it gets printed out. And we know that by the end of the show, if we've done a good job, we will have tangled everything up or set all the house of cards up to either fail or almost fall, and then we'll catch it, and then it just feels like a success when that either pays off or gets avoided or something like that. So
yeah, and it also plays with your idea of what you were saying about character arcs. If there's like even just a tiny, like in the first episode was Parking Lot Wedding, there's a character named Sebastian who was always going to talk about himself the second he got up there.
Right.
And then Thomas and I will have it in our heads if we have something developing, like, oh, if we could pay off blank, if we could find a way to make this character arc happen. So in the end, his character arc is that he finds out he loves about his brother. He doesn't talk about himself, talks about that. We really do try to pay that stuff off. And Thomas is right, we do have a clock, but you get a feeling, like we just did one of these scenes, maybe we should, be this, or we have so many characters, we can't introduce anymore. Or, you know what, we can open this up a little bit. But it's all nonverbal. We don't say anything. It's all feeling. It's all working with someone for a long time. And when you said 52 minutes, we did that as a bit. When we do shows on tour, it's roughly an hour 20. Those are all of our shows. But then for Netflix, they asked us to keep it under an hour. And we realized that this is very new for people who just watch stand-up. They've never seen long-form improv. So we wanted to make sure that we kept it tight. So we took out a lot of our talking to the audience at the very beginning, just like, doing bits, making sure they're comfortable. And made sure that we kept it low enough where people wouldn't get scared and be like, an hour, 20 minutes for what the hell is this?
I mean, you got to understand, Kevin, these people were there for 5 hours. What you're seeing is an edited version of basically a 5-hour show. It was endless.
It was unbelievable. You should have seen how it really ended.
When are they going to release the Netflix cut of that? That's the I want to see the 5-hour cut.
Thomas has it on a reel-to-reel in his house. So if you ever want to see it, go to Thomas's house. I'll give you the address, and it's a reel-to-reel.
I got it on 8 mil.
8 mil? That's so funny. I have an 8mm camera right here.
That's how he filmed it. It's just one 8mm camera just on Thomas's eye. A very arty piece for 5 hours.
Yeah. One of the things I find interesting, I think is brilliant, are the payoffs that come back. There's a bit in the first sketch or the first improv special.
How dare you say sketch?
Improv special, I apologize.
Thank you.
But the actual ghost bit was so funny to me because you go by and you both clearly don't know where that's supposed to go. And Ben, I believe at one point you go, oh, we'll come back to you later. And then obviously the ghost plays back towards the end. I guess my question is, and there's probably no exact answer to this, but how do you know when the right moment is to pop that back? Does that like click in your head like 10 minutes prior and you go, okay, the ghost should show up at the wedding and this should be the arc of the story? Like, does that just happen in the moment or does it happen like a couple minutes prior and you can plan it where it goes?
For that exact ghost one, first of all, the reason why that happened in the beginning is because Thomas and I fuck with each other. So literally Thomas was just messing with me. It just happened to be that this was a show that was being filmed for millions of people. But that, like in any show, that's what he would do. Just be like, I'm a goblin. Like, why? like so.
Deal with it.
Like the
Bye.
alien in the third one, right? Or the second one. The alien was kind of came out of like to mess with them, right?
No, the alien was because in the law school interview, she said that aliens existed in her city.
And I didn't remember that. For the whole show, I was like, why the fuck is Ben an alien? That's why as the character, I was like, I don't want to open this door because I don't understand what's happening.
So you will actually play into not understanding, because in the show you'll have these great bits where you'll go, I don't know who you are, remind me what your name is. The Marnie moment was great, but like, yeah, so if you actually don't remember it, you'll use that to your advantage to play into your comedy essentially, like with the alien, like not going in there. It's almost like you're using that because you don't know why he's doing it.
I think you can cover for yourself up to an extent, but what they say, there's sort of like a rule in improv of there's no mistakes in improv, but I do think one of the mistakes you could possibly do is not understand what's going on and not take the time to clarify it in some way. I think when you see green improvisers do that a lot of when it just sort of seems like they're too scared to like figure it out, and then they're just sort of lying to each other like, yes, I know what's going on. But I mean, Ben, just to go back on Ben's like brilliant conclusion of the ghost, I think it can happen in kind of different ways, as you suggested, Kevin. There could be a way where you're like partway through the show being, oh wow, if there's an opportunity to connect those two in that way, I think that would be a cool move. Anyway, I'll file that later and see if it happens, or maybe I might try and make it happen in some way. But there's also the opportunity of where you're just like, oh, of course we need a priest. Okay, it'll be the ghost. And of course there was the dead robber, and when you're dead, you're a ghost. There you go. And that'll just sort of happen when it does, kind of thing.
Thomas coming up as the ghost, I thought was so funny. And then when I saw that in my head, I remember the moment when we were doing it where I was like, oh, it'd be a great callback if the person who died in that Joker scenario ended up being the ghost. But because Thomas and I are just a two-person show and we play all the different characters, I had to wait for Thomas to stop being the priest and change character, because I had the idea before I was like, right when I was going to be the priest. And I then was becoming another character, trying to lead him so he would have to change. I remember this moment in my head because I had the idea of being like, oh man, I hope I get to do this. I hope I get to do this. And I remember, because Thomas was the priest, and I was like, I need to get him here. And so I would
get me to the priest.
Yeah, and so I kept talking.
So you guide him. That's
so yeah,
cool. He was trying to trick me into being another character.
That's
Not trick me, but like lure me into being another character, so the priest character was available, so he could go and make that initiation.
That's exactly correct.
How are you doing that while you're live? How are you even juggling that?
Now that you watch that scene, you could watch that scene exactly how I haven't watched it for that purpose, but I remember just that moment when I'm like, oh, this is how I can call back that great move by Thomas by making that ghost. The ghost is here. So how can I, and so in my head, I'm like, how can I turn the ghost into something that happened? And I was like, oh, this person died. So you could probably see me right before I turned into the priest. It was a little bit before where I'm trying to get the
where you're going.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Or like I'm trying to put it in the audience's thought process that like I forget what the idea that, like, do you love him, or I forget what it was. I was trying to get the idea in the zeitgeist. And then I was trying to get Thomas to in front of me, away from the priest, so I can become the priest and then come off and be like, blah, blah, blah. But it's crazy because we play all of our characters. In any other long form show, I would tap whoever the priest is and become the priest and then just whatever. But we don't do that. We play that so if you rewatch that, you'll literally see the thought process of that. And then you'll see the joy of like Thomas seeing what just happened. But also there's a huge joy of, because I didn't see this one coming, at the very end when Thomas is the ghost and goes, I'm free, because we've done his final thing. I love that so much because it was like we nailed the ghost thing, and then Thomas is like, and here's a fucking cherry on top. Yeah. And I was like, that cherry will also be a big enough thing to end our show. It's a big laugh and a big moment. And we called our show right after that. I was so happy.
The purpose of that whole wedding was to free the ghost of the person that those children killed all those years ago when they were in 8th grade.
Oh my goodness.
Is one of the funniest sketches. All right, sketch! I keep saying sketch.
Wow. Improvised comedy special.
Comedy special. My apologies. I'm learning, guys. I'm learning. All right.
Unbelievable.
This is the whole reason I'm doing the interview. I want to educate people on the brilliance of what you guys are doing. That's the whole point of this. You mentioned thought process, and I'm actually fascinated to know what's going through your minds when you're hearing the answers to your questions. So, for example, when you say to the audience, what's something you're looking forward to, what's something you're dreading, what are things you pick up on that start getting bits going in your mind? Like, for example, if someone says something along the lines of, going to a wedding or graduating, what are things you're looking for that help you then create the bits you're going to do?
Kevin, nobody's asked us. I'm very happy we're doing this because we don't often get to the nerdy aspect of all this stuff, which I love that you're covering.
Well done, Kevin, you fucking dork.
There's another F-bomb, Tom. Come on, you had done 2.
Well, you opened it up. Pandora's box is open. It's just a
Don't tell me not to do anything. I'm going to do it.
Absolutely.
Stay loose.
What was the question? Sorry.
No, I think you, how do you
what
pick
part
up
of
on stuff?
Got it. Yeah, you go first.
I think you're sort of, you're just looking for stuff that feels pretty interesting. I mean, it's like very obvious when something bizarre happens and you're like, oh man, that's great. Like, but you're also just trying to be receptive to kind of download everything and figure it out later. You're going to find where to put it in as the show goes on. But you're just sort of trying to see, you're looking for details, like the fact, again, to the wedding one, where the guy says, going to a wedding. We're like, okay, yeah, wedding, we've done that before. But the fact that the guy, it's not his wedding, he's talking about going their wedding, his friends. That's like a great detail. That's like, okay, now we know, even if it's not going to be accurate, but now we know our version of this character. And then you just sort of ask questions about people. It's the characters that are really going to propel this thing.
Like Short Paul, for example. I feel like that when that bit was given to you, Tom, did you already know? When did you know you were going to put your feet up?
But first of all, can I say this? That when some character like that happens, it is a fucking race to see who gets to play Short Paul. Like I think there was a scene where when he sat down as Short Paul, I believe I started as if thinking that I was going to be Short Paul.
Yes, you weren't Marty yet. You switched to Marty in that scene.
No, I was like, all right, we haven't brought Short Paul. And then I was about to do it. And then I saw Thomas's feet were up. And I was like, well, you can't have 2 Short Pauls.
Dude, but when did you realize were the feet going up in the actual sitting moment? Or did you know you were going to do that prior to sitting down?
I knew I was going to do that like a second before it happened. I think the only thing I knew was that there's a guy called Short Paul, and he dated the girl at one point. And so, okay, well, let's escalate that. Let's make him love. But again, that decision to be like, I love her, and I'm kind of like still in love with her, and what's more about her? That's discovery. Just like you're walking towards a chair, and you're going, I'm going to be Short Paul. Okay, well, this could be interesting. And then you do some physical stupid bit.
Yeah.
Ben,
but that's also Thomas is incredible at that. Thomas is incredible at everything. I don't mean to say we oftentimes talk about that. We're both very well-rounded improvisers, but Thomas used the phrase once that like our superhuman power sometimes is this. One of the many superhuman powers that Thomas has is the specifics and the intricacies of his characters make it so you know from a tiny little thing exactly who that is. And so I love that. So him doing that, and then the voice and the way he carried his whole body. And the other thing about that scene, just to give props to Thomas, is when we were editing it, we're looking at which cameras to use with Elise, our editor. We looked at the runtime, and it was something like 7 or 8 minutes. And it was just 7 or 8 minutes of Thomas on a chair like this and me just talking. And I remember in the edit, me being like, to Thomas, are people going to be interested in, like, it's just 2 people talking for 6 or 7 minutes? Or like, do you think it's going to make people bored who don't know what improv is? And anytime we watched it, we laughed. And Thomas was like, no, they're going to, you always play to the top of your intelligence, and you never assume that the audience is, they're supposed to be just as smart as we are. We never dumb down anything. And to people's credit, they love that scene. And it's just 2 people talking for that. It's just 2 people talking. I love that scene works.
And the edit's great on that scene too, because we cut back to the feet every once in a while. It's all like, and that's the next question I wanted to ask you guys, because your crowd sees everything without edits. They see without camera angles. They are watching you live. Then you have an audience at home who's watching your improv special. improv special.
Nice.
I'm getting it right. And they're watching it through edits and angles. So my question to you is, how different do you have to operate as actors and doing your work that you're doing, knowing there are cameras filming you, in the sense of, I think there is actually a moment, I want to say in one of the episodes, where you actually stop and ask to make sure your camera's catching you, right? I think that was, I remember that at one
Is
point.
there? Oh,
I
no.
believe so.
We were definitely aware of it and doing
Right.
bits on it from time to time.
And that's what I wanted to know. Like, does that change the way you delivered your jokes? Like, for example, Short Paul is an interesting one, because at home we go back to the feet, and it's almost like a reminder, and you re-laugh at it. And the audience just sees it consistently. So it's almost like it works differently for us at home than it did for the audience that you saw it live. Is that something you think about when you're doing a show for Netflix?
I don't think the only time during the performing of it, the only difference was we knew that we had a camera that was facing out to the audience, and that meant that when we played the priest facing the people, we didn't have to like play it 3/4 or something.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
and we could just play it to the back. But it was really all about in the edit, that like we weren't going to perform it differently. We just knew that we had to edit it appropriately, because the second you edit something, you're deciding what to show, and therefore it has to have purpose, and there's some kind of like storytelling just in the edit. And we knew that we didn't want to keep it all the time in the wide and make it sort of feel like you're distant watching the show over there, because at home it's a totally different experience, because the show is scene work and there are characters and they're having like dialogue and stuff. You really want to be kind of close and like in the scene, and then pull out if need be to show physical humor and stuff like that.
I weirdly enough appreciated, there was this one random shot actually in that Short Paul bit where Ben, right after you become Marnie, that they actually take, you say something to Short Paul and he gets like upset and he looks to the side like this, and they cut to the camera angle of Tom, and it was a really great emotional cue, like for me as an audience member. And I wondered, I'm like, did the people that were sitting there also get that experience? And they probably didn't.
Well, you're literally saying the thing that when Thomas and I did this, we're like, okay, for some reason there's a stigma that if you film improv comedy, it takes you away from the experience. It just doesn't help it. Oh. But what Thomas and I thought about was, you know what, let's use the form to our advantage. We're going to use 9 cameras. We spent the majority of our budget just making the thing. So it's like, well, we're going to use 9 cameras. We're going to have every angle. We're going to cover ourselves. So now like when we play Carnegie Hall, where it's 600 people or whatever, 3,200 people can't see Thomas's face in that exact move you're talking about. Let's give them the opportunity to see those little things. And we would talk with our editor, at least, being like, all right, now single on Thomas right here because he does this thing like that. And then I remember we literally picked the exact moment of when we would go to a wide when I moved Thomas's chair so he can stomp out his cigarette or whatever it is. And all those things are conscious because we're using a format that really isn't used for long form improv. If we have all these cameras, what's the best storytelling method in order to tell the story? So it's really like that was a big thing. And the other thing you're talking about, what were you aware of outside of cameras? The things that we were thrown at the last second were, we don't have money in the budget to license songs. So if one of us sang a song on stage.
Oh, that's why one of you guys says no licensed songs at the wedding? Is that why, Tom, you say that?
It's exactly why.
Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't know.
And we can't use big brands, because if we said a big brand and we're like, Hershey's Kisses suck, like then they could
or
be
celebrities or whatever. Like I couldn't impersonate so and so and make that person seem bad.
Oh,
they could say you can't air that, and then we would cut it. And the problem doing that with a stand-up special is fine. You lose one joke. Doing that with us, you lose a plot point. Then the whole show doesn't make sense. So I think it was a day or two before we started filming, we learned all those things. And I sing like a fucking idiot during all of our shows, even if it's just while Tom is doing like an incredible monologue. I'll be in the background being like, do you hear the people? And like, just to like make the moment play out. And so for an improviser who's always not supposed to be in their head and always be open, to be like, don't do that. Don't say candy bars. Don't say like, it was weird. So our first show.
How are we going to do it if you can't say candy bars?
I know, we always say candy bars. So our first show, which didn't make the air, that's the one we got to cut one, was a lot of talking about the unusual thing, which is there's cameras around us. We can't sing. We can't do this. And we're like, people are just going to watch the special for wanting to watch special. They're not going to know that stuff. So, yeah.
I'm curious how much you guys allow for breaking. And one thing I've noticed in the show is, I don't know, Ben, if this is me just looking into this too much, but like I've noticed, like when you'll try not to break, you'll rub your nose or something. You'll do something like.
Really?
Well, yeah, I was watching it during the show because I always found my favorite part of SNL was when they would break. And I know Lorne Michaels has always been kind of against that, but I always found like when Fallon would break or whoever would break, I just found that to be funny. But in your show, you break at these perfect moments that actually add to the comedy. And I know it's not planned that you're breaking, but do you have ways you cover up like a break, or like is that something you're subconscious about, or do you think about it?
I'll say sometimes when I make Thomas break or Thomas makes me break, we'll turn it into like a cry. I remember that happening at Largo sometimes, where Thomas will be like, I'll look at Thomas. First of all, we love to make each other laugh on stage. It's like a beautiful little gold medal, a gold star for the day. But I remember a couple times, or I'm sure I've done it as well, or I'll put my hand, for me, I'll put my face in my hand so you can't see. But there's one time I remember where Thomas was laughing. I don't know if you remember this, Thomas. We do too many shows, we don't remember anything. Thomas was laughing, and he was like, and he made it look like he was crying instead, so it wouldn't break the moment. But then I had to be like, "Why are you crying?" He goes, "I don't know, I'm so happy," or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But
It's definitely not something that we try to do, but because we hashtag keep it loose.
Whoa! Hashtag keep it loose.
Keep it loose.
Hashtag stay loose. We like allow for it. I think sometimes, I mean, basically all you're seeing is when we laugh is just because we've been caught off guard and we genuinely think it's funny. And like I'll definitely sometimes try to stifle it, but sometimes I'll catch myself. No, this is really, these specials have been the only time that I've seen us do it. And I've noticed that sometimes I'll just feel like in the scene, but like smirking. It's just because I'm genuinely having fun. Like I'm just sitting there, excited to be there, and that I hope that like that is not calculated in any way, because I was like, man, wipe that stupid grin off my face. But I feel like it's like, I'm just like how Seinfeld would be in his show, and he'd just be sitting there smiling. He just thinks it's all fun, and he's happy to be there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm just like, this is
Seinfeld
my dream.
Smiling. I found that funny. I always found that funny, personally. I
think the audience feels a part of it too. Then, like, because it's the same. We never plan on breaking, but they're like, oh, these two. We've heard a lot from a lot of cool people that we respect, and one or two of them was like, it just looks like you guys are having so much fucking fun up there, and we are. We've been doing it for a long time, but for free, because we love doing that, making people laugh, making each other laugh. So, yeah.
Tom, you talking about watching the special. I'm actually curious to ask you both now, after watching it and seeing yourself in an edit and seeing yourself on Netflix, how do you find yourself thinking differently about how you perform? Like,
I'm just not a fan.
Not really. No, but I mean, did you find things about your acting that you want to like work on, think about? Like, were there things that stuck out to you? I know you mentioned something specific just now. Like, we see it, my wife and I watched all three of them back to back, and we were dying laughing, and we don't see issues or any problems. But actors always, I always hear that they watch themselves, they don't like watching themselves. Did you find anything about the way you deliver comedy, or anything that you would work on or change?
I try not to get in my own head, because then I don't want to screw up what we got. And my worry is that if I'm like, oh, I do this too much. So I don't think that we had to watch this so many times. We edited it, we had to really, get these, whatever. So I don't know if there's something that I would, I don't know if there's like, whatever. But there is stuff when we're doing shows sometimes that, like, after a show, if Thomas and I didn't love it, or like, hey, we should stop doing this type of thing, or we've done this a lot, let's not do, like, not the show a lot, but like, I played a wizard last show, let's make sure there's no wizards in this show, you know what I mean? So it's like, we'll do little tweaks on the fly like that. But watching myself, you'll be like, oh, is that how I laugh? Or the stupid stuff like, oh, I look like I have a double chin every time I talk. Like, that's the stuff that I was looking at. But
it's more vanity than anything.
Yeah, it's more like, oh God, I'm an ugly Jewish person. And Thomas would be like, yeah, you are. And I'd be like, oh, all right. So I don't know if there's anything I would change from watching it. We haven't performed since these have come out, which is weird.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the audiences are going to be, if they're going to be a little bit different, or how they feel, or anything like that.
So right now there's 3 of them on Netflix. I want 25 more. What do fans need to do in order to get more of these? Because I feel like one thing I will say, and obviously we joked in the beginning about me messing up the word sketch and improv, but there are people who don't actually understand what the format is. And I love that you explain it in your show. And I think it's actually perfect the way it's done. But how do we get more of these out there? I mean, is it a demand thing? Can people reach out to Netflix and say they want more? Because I want more. I'll keep rewatching these, but I want more. You know what I mean?
This is great. This is perfect timing.
the secret to getting more really content of any show that you really like is numbers. And if you are sitting there, you've seen it, and you're like, man, this is awesome. In order to ensure that there's more, tell your friends, like tell anyone you know that you should watch them. We've been very fortunate to have some people, you know, tweet or
Lin-Manuel Miranda was all about it. I mean, it was all.
Yeah.
I love seeing the.
It's been great. Just honestly, it's like more of that. It's since it's now on Netflix, it's available all the time, and since it's new to potentially some people of long form improv or what the heck is that? That's certainly not a stand-up special. It relies on this sort of word of mouth of like, no, trust me, it's funny. You have to see it, kind of thing. And any of that would do us a great honor.
Well, and by the way, it brings the audience into it as well. Like if the audience really loves it, they have the ability to help us get more just by watching, which is so Thomas is right. Tweet, Instagram, TikTok. We're trying to learn what TikTok is.
Watch this TikTok.
Make I'm Loose a TikTok thing or something like that, or do I don't know what it is, but like we get more if enough people watch them. So doing this interview and you telling people exactly what's going on is exactly what we need.
All right, so I'm going to end on this because I find that what you guys do is just so special. And
wait, Kevin, before you end, at the very end, can you pull out one DVD, like a random DVD behind you?
Anything?
Yeah, but you can't look. We're going to tell you exactly when you're done.
Just go like you'll have to reach behind you.
All right, we'll do it
at the end.
I got two of these bad boys. So
my God.
Yeah. And then we got.
You're the last person still collecting DVDs.
Look at that Revenge of the Jedi post. No,
Revenge of the Jedi.
Have you ever seen this before, Ben?
No.
So this was a mess. This was a mistake. It's actually it says Revenge of the Jedi. If you look at Vader has a blue saber, which is wrong. Hamill has a red saber, which is wrong. And the movie was called Revenge of the Jedi initially, and then they switched it to Return. So this is the actual one sheet that went to theaters before it was called Return of the Jedi.
How'd you get it?
Lauren, actually, my wife's right here. She wanted to say hi to you guys anyway.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi. I literally have like seen it twice now. It's so good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So much. And like Ben, I'm like such a big fan of like Silicon Valley and Sonic.
And Tom,
we watch it like we're like literally like such big fans of you guys in this household.
Thank you.
Tell her thank you so much.
We were at a poster store randomly somewhere one time, and they had it there, and we were like, we have to get that. It's such a cool piece.
It's great.
I never knew the story behind that.
By the way, how they know by then that Darth Vader has a red saber? That's insane.
That's what I don't understand is how they messed that up. But that's a whole other thing. But one of the things that last thing I'll ask you guys is this. Do you happen to remember the first improv you guys ever did together? And if you don't remember the first one,
Thomas does. Thomas was telling me about it the other day when we got interviewed. I didn't remember.
I wanted to know what this was, if you don't mind. Ask me.
I do. I remember, bits and pieces of it. It was that we first started going up at UCB in New York under the Christie's supermarket, and we would go up at this Wednesday night, 11 p.m. Wednesday night show called School Night, where you'd get 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up and we did a show where we kind of asked what someone's summer job was, and they talked about, I think, serving ice cream. And it's funny because our shows experimented with different formats and stuff after this, but we ended up doing a super condensed version of what we do now, which was it's all in some kind of self-contained world. The characters know each other. There's a bit of a plot that develops, and I think it was just there was a boss that was upset with everybody, and it was.
Do you remember a bit from it, like a joke from it? Do you know, because now it's slowly,
I just remember ice cream and a boss, and there was probably some dimension that we've sort of warped to.
I will say this, that at the beginning, especially when you're like feeling it out with somebody else, like if that's our first time, the only way we do another one is if that show went very well. So it must have gone well, yeah.
Yeah, it was killer.
Is it different doing improv with somebody else? Like in
yeah,
sense
of
like,
course.
And I obviously there's a difference, but I guess my question more is, does it has to help that you guys know each other and work together a lot. But when you improv with somebody for the first time ever, are there tricks to figure out maybe where they might be going if you're not familiar with them?
I think there's Thomas and I think there's a couple things. One is that if you play enough with someone, you can learn their rhythms. But Thomas and I have something very special beyond that, where it just for some reason it clicks on a very exciting level, especially for two people who've been doing it for 20 years. But in terms of there's a language. Like Thomas came from Canada where he was doing improv, then he went to Chicago, and then he went to New York. So we didn't come up in the same schools, but there's like an improv language that you can kind of figure it out with someone. You won't be, I mean, every now and then it'll be like beautiful, but it takes a while to find the real rhythm. But the language of what long form improv is established in his side, and then in my side, even though I was taught the game of the scene, I'm not quite certain what it was taught in Chicago, maybe something similar. But we were able to get the same. You're able to do improv with someone who's done long form enough, but then to really find a rhythm takes time, and just it takes the right person. Like I could have done improv with 10 years with somebody else, and we never would have gotten the same results as Thomas and I, just because Thomas and I, for some reason, we're very similar and very different, and we just work very well on stage together.
Yeah, well, I think the specials are amazing. I appreciate y'all's time. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over.
Here's the best part, baby. This is what I want.
Are we doing the Blu-rays? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just doing random?
Yes. You got to
go. Look at us while you do it.
Wait, you guys got to get something random then.
No. This is all about you, baby. Go behind you.
Yeah, Tom, come on. Tom's in. Ben, you got to get something random. Get something random.
I got a lot of props. What show? Name a show. I'll bring a prop.
Bring a show. Parks and Rec. I mean, still gets obvious. Oh, I actually picked... I looked at it already, but I didn't look at it before I picked it out. Sorry.
All right.
But I'm very happy with my choice because I think it's one of the most underrated comedies ever made.
I've got my treasure.
All right. Who's going first?
We go it on 3.
All right, we're going on 3?
Okay. Wait. I want to guess. Wait, Thomas, guess his DVD. First, all you know is he has a Revenge of the Jedi poster.
He said it was his favorite comedies.
One of my favorite comedies that I think is truly underrated.
Can you give us a decade? Which decade?
Actually, I'll tell you the decade on this. 2000s.
Oh, it's Boner Boys 2.
Oh, is it Boner Boys 2?
Boner Boys 3.
All right, 2000s.
Oh, okay.
2000s, of
Come
course.
on, man. Wait.
All right, Boner Boys 3 can't get hard this time. All right, 1, 2,
I think
3.
yours is Anchorman.
1, 2, 3.
Oh,
Not another teen movie.
Wait, what?
Really, I own that DVD. I own Not Another Teen Movie as a DVD.
So underrated, by the way. Wait,
Yeah.
all right. Everyone explain. Tom, what is that?
This is a replica of my face that I had made out of my own pocket money. No, this is when you get prosthetics, you get something like this. And in Silicon Valley, end of the show, we were aged up a little bit for like the mockumentary at the end. And I said, "Can I keep it?" And they're like, yes.
Do you remember like making that? Like, was it like Solo, Han Solo getting carbonite or something like that?
Yeah,
Like, did you have to
they
sit
had
there?
a full body rig, and I sort of No, they put, you get a little breathing tube, and they pour all this crud all over your face. It's great.
I'll never forget. I'm not trying to name drop, but I was able to interview Harrison Ford for episode 7, and I asked him about the carbonite. And he literally sat there and froze his face in the interview and did the carbonite face for me. He goes, I had to sit there for hours doing this. And I was like, I'm looking at Harrison Ford recreating the carbonite scene in front of my face. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? How did I get here? All right, Ben, share yours.
This is for one of the episodes we did at the Snake Hole Lounge. This is what they had on the tables to reserve them. So we would put them on like almost all the tables to make it look like for Parks and Rec, the Snake Hole Lounge reserved for just Tom and I.
That's so awesome, man. I listen, I really love talking to you guys. I mean, I appreciate you guys letting me break down the craft because we joke, but I genuinely think what you guys did in this show is so special. And I hope that more people see it and talk about it and you guys make more of these because it was honestly we were saying it was one of the funniest things we've seen in a long time. So we love it.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate
Thanks
it,
both
yeah.
of you. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
No, I appreciate you guys.
To spread the word.